today's top boxing news.
Ow! Start with this. Very recently, Boxing King Media spoke with Steffi Bull, manager and trainer of Terry Harper, and he was grilled about rumors in reference to her potential move upstairs for a Hannah Rankin fight. A Hannah Rankin title shot at junior middleweight. This fight is quickly picking up steam.
I wonder who approached who.
Whose idea was this? Because Hannah Rankin and Natasha Jonas, they were quite publicly having a dialogue about a unification match between them. So at what point did this become an idea, and whose idea was it? Was it Team Rankin's idea? Was it Team Harper's idea, or just somebody at Matchroom?
I wonder who approached who.
And I wonder if Team Harper ain't biting off more than they can chew. Is this a miscalculation?
Fighting Alicia Baumgartner off a long layoff and a surgery was a miscalculation.
Continuing to campaign as a super featherweight could also be interpreted as a miscalculation if Terry Harper during that long layoff did in fact outgrow 130 pounds, did outgrow the super featherweight division. That also can be interpreted as a miscalculation, though you have to love Team Harper's spirit.
That's a team that's got guts. That's a team that believes in their fighter. Terry Harper is a fighter that believes in herself.
She must, if she's willing to take on a naturally bigger, experienced fighter, a reigning champion in Hannah Rankin, who's shared the ring with anyone from Clarissa Shields to Savannah Marshall.
Hannah put the last girl she fought in the hospital.
Needless to say, Terry Harper must really believe in herself if she's willing to take on a fight like this. She must like her chances. Though, what are her chances? What are they really? If she were to go from 135 past 140, past 147, all the way up to 154 pounds.
That's what Natasha Jonas did in her last fight.
Seems to be what Terry Harper means to do now. Terry Harper, who actually swapped punches with Natasha Jonas. I'm sure you're all aware of their Fight of the Year candidate. And if Natasha can do it, maybe what Team Harper figures they can do it too.
Can they?
There's only one way to find out. It really was awe-inspiring seeing Natasha Jonas go from lightweight all the way up there to junior middleweight, seeing that she had speed, athleticism, movement, and power, that her power actually carried. Or was it that her speed...
Was it that her power carried, or that because she's naturally smaller than most other junior middleweights, Chris Namis included...
Was it that because Natasha Jonas is a naturally smaller fighter than most other junior middleweights, she's a naturally faster fighter? And what really caught Chris Namis off guard, Chris Namis, who took that fight on short notice, what really sat her on her back pocket was Natasha Jonas' speed. She's a very accurate puncher and a strong puncher at the lower weights, and she really trounced and trapped Chris Namis in their fight for the vacant WBO title. But how much did speed have to do with that? Was it just raw power, or was it speed? Or was it a bit of both? And will Terry Harper...
She have that same luck in her junior middleweight debut against Hannah Rankin?
It's a legitimate question. Terry Harper's characteristics as a fighter, she does pack a punch at 130, 135 pounds. Her best punches are her straight punches, mid-range to inside. She's vulnerable, but mid-range to outside...
That's her sweet spot.
It's where she does her best work, gets off her best shots. She's got an educated jab, educated lead hand. I imagine she'd use that jab quite a bit in a fight with Hannah Rankin. It doesn't behoove Terry Harper, the naturally smaller fighter, to go blow for blow, toe-to-toe with the naturally bigger Hannah Rankin. I reiterate, Hannah put the last girl she fought in the hospital.
Terry's been stopped before.
In some ways, this move might mirror what we just saw with Natasha Jonas and her ascendance up to junior middleweight. But don't forget, she fought Chris Namis, and Chris took the fight on short notice. Whereas this fight with Hannah Rankin, this ain't no short notice fight. Hannah Rankin ain't a replacement opponent. She's a reigning champion who would have a full camp.
Situation's slightly different, slightly more dangerous.
A little more than just slightly. The onus would be on Terry Harper to keep this a boxing match against the naturally bigger and more durable Hannah Rankin.
Can she do that?
Fun part is finding out that might not be so fun for
Belter.
Terry Harper. If they've miscalculated, if they're biting off more than they can chew, I'd be lying to you if I didn't feel that this was an intriguing fight, ambitious and ballsy.
That's what you thought about the Alicia Baumgartner fight, and you see how that turned out.
The news has had some time to settle, had some time to process the information, what information is being made available. Initially, when Terry moved up to lightweight, I didn't figure that this would be her very next fight.
This threw me for a loop when this news first broke.
So it's not official yet. It's not set in stone. It's not a guarantee that this will be Terry Harper's next fight, at least not at this time. Devoid of an official announcement, we don't know yet if Hannah will take on Natasha or Terry.
By now, the people at Sky and Boxer have had time to up the ante.
Knowing that the people over there at Matchroom are attempting to sweep the rug from under them and poach their next potential opponent for Natasha Jonas. By now, the story's been out there long enough that Ben Shalom and Adam Smith may have already made Hannah Rankin an improved offer for a Natasha Jonas unification match.
Gonna be interesting to see what shakes out when the smoke finally settles.
In men's light heavyweight news, per a tweet from Mark Ortega, Eddie Hearn said he'd be willing to make Bivol versus Beterbiev on ESPN, that it doesn't have to be on DAZN. Does Top Rank want it? Eddie says he would love to do a blind bid with Bob, where each puts their offer in an envelope, and the bigger offer gets the rights to the fight. That's not the first time that Eddie Hearn has proposed a blind bid for what is a cross-promotional, cross-network situation. He made a similar proposition when it came to the Gervonta Davis versus Tevin Farmer fight 2 or 3 years ago, and Leonard Ellerbe would have none of it. No blind bid.
No nothing.
They were both champions at the time, Tevin Farmer and Gervonta Davis. Tevin had the red belt, the IBF, and Gervonta had the WBA.
Full WBA title, not the regular title.
I don't know how receptive Bob would be to such a proposition, a blind bid, because what that essentially does is it raises the stakes. It requires both parties to up the ante and bid generously to beat out the other guy.
I don't know how Bob Arum prices a fight like that at this time. Devoid of a blind bid, I don't know how Bob views the value of that fight and what it's worth.
What it's worth to him, I should say. 2 Russian nationals fighting on U.S. soil. What's that worth to Top Rank? What's that worth to Bob Arum?
What's it worth to ESPN?
Do they want to do that, or do they want to stick to their original plan? To have Artur Beterbiev travel to London to defend his 3 alphabet titles against Frank Warren's horse in the race, Anthony Yard.
I don't get the sense that either Bob Arum or Frank Warren want to make any alterations to their plan to accommodate a matchroom fighter.
Dmitry Bivol says he wants that fight, as does Artur Beterbiev. That fight, that unification match for the undisputed light heavyweight championship, seems to be at the top of the priority list for both fighters, both unbeaten champions. If you're Artur Beterbiev, this might be music to your ears, a blind bid, because what it could result in is you making more money than just staying on your own side of the street.
Not that Artur Beterbiev's sole motivation is money.
A great motivator, but the Beterbiev people seem to want that Bivol fight sooner than later. That's at the top of their priority list, and this opens up an avenue of opportunity for that to happen, provided that the people at Top Rank are willing to do it.
I reiterate, doing it could make the fight more expensive than Bob Arum would like.
It's not as simple as simply putting a price on the fight so much as what is the fight worth to you. You're trying to beat out the other guy. You're trying to beat out the other promoter.
Bob Arum's not in the business of giving money away or overpaying for fights just to beat out Eddie Hearn.
Say Tyson Fury we're talking about. I know that Tyson Fury versus Dillian Veit purse bid almost immediately comes to mind, but Tyson Fury's a bigger name than Artur Beterbiev.
Let's not pretend both of those guys are worth the same money, because they're not.
Bob can always ignore Eddie's suggestion. Not participate in a blind bid and simply proceed as planned. He'll do the fight between Artur and Dmitry when he's ready to do the fight between Artur and Dmitry. Bob Arum might not go for this. Leonard Ellerbe didn't.
Bob might not either.
We'll see what happens.
Lou DiBella is a guy who, he's up and down like a Lady of the Night's underwear. He's a guy who, literally, you do not know what mood you're going to get from Lou DiBella. He's, in my opinion, a guy that's quite unhappy, and he doesn't like young, fresh blood coming in and trying to disrupt the game. But at the same time, you've got guys like Oscar de la Hoya, who's obviously got that deep sort of vengeance because he lost the pound-for-pound biggest star in boxing, and I signed him. So there's the history there. You've got Leonard Ellerbe, who has lost his mind, and I've apparently said something that upset him. The British sarcasm doesn't sit very well with a lot of these people. Who else you got? Stephen Espinoza just sits there liking negative tweets about me all day, which is like very, very flattering that like the head of Showtime would be that bothered about what I'm trying to do. I've got to be a little bit careful, because at the same time I don't want to upset people to the point where they just won't make fights. Like the thing is with Arum, he's like mental. But he's 90, so he deserves to be mental.
Right.
But he will make a fight. Like, if the business is right, Bob will always make a fight. He'll speak badly about me. He doesn't like me. But where others will do, it will affect the job they do for their client because of the emotion, which is a really big mistake. So, but I also want to be myself. I don't want to come in here and just sort of brown-nose people and be a snide and like, I'm just going to speak my mind. So like me, don't like me.
Things like proposing a blind bid for the Beterbiev versus Bivol fight, little things like that are the reason, part of the reason, that these American-based promoters aren't too fond of Eddie Hearn. He has fast become a fly in the ointment for all of them.
A nuisance.
Well, a bit more than just a nuisance. These American-based promoters that Eddie Hearn's talking about, they don't welcome competition, you understand.
You're not going to welcome anybody who's going to make their job a little harder, just a little bit harder.
Because that is the situation when it comes to Matchroom as a promotional outfit in America and DAZN as a platform. Now, granted that there are some nuances and subtleties depending on which promoter we're talking about. Oscar De La Hoya, for example, his resentment towards Eddie.
DAZN doesn't have the same relationship with Oscar that they have with Eddie.
The first thing. The second thing is the Canelo Alvarez stuff. For some reason, Oscar De La Hoya resents Eddie Hearn for Canelo having done business with him on the heels of Canelo leaving Golden Boy Promotions. Oscar De La Hoya...
He's not taking responsibility. He's not taking ownership.
Eddie Hearn isn't the reason that Canelo Alvarez parted ways with Golden Boy Promotions. That was building over time. That has more to do with Canelo and Oscar and the Golden Boy Promotions outfit than Eddie Hearn.
That doesn't stop Oscar from taking jabs at Eddie.
It's really what his resentment is all about. With Lou and Bob and Leonard,
It's a little different. It's all about a competitive market with them and Eddie Hearn being a nuisance.
making offers to their fighters. Eddie Hearn made an offer to have Gervonta Davis come over to the DAZN side of things. A substantial offer, a multi-million-dollar offer, at a time when Gervonta hadn't even debuted on pay-per-view yet, if you ask me. That offer that Eddie Hearn made to Gervonta Davis for a Tevin Farmer fight, I feel that's the catalyst that resulted in Gervonta debuting on pay-per-view. When you got a guy like Eddie offering a kid $7-8 million for a fight that really ain't even worth that much, and you get that kid to reject that offer, you've got to give him some compensation. It was in the spring of 2019 that Eddie Hearn proposed that they do a blind bid for a Davis versus Farmer unification match. Leonard Ellerby wasn't happy about that, and at this time, Gervonta hadn't debuted on pay-per-view yet. It wasn't till the fall of the following year, in October of 2020, that Gervonta Davis made his pay-per-view debut. You can see how that might create a problem when some other outfit is offering your fighter more money than he's making with you. That can create a rather expensive problem and expensive situation. The same rings true for Top Ranks fighters. Eddie Hearn is open to doing a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight on their side of things, so long as they do a blind bid.
May the biggest pot win.
Whoever places the biggest bid wins the rights to the fight. That creates an expensive problem for Top Rank, a problem that they don't want, a problem that they don't need. They look at it as Eddie Hearn and Matchroom meddling in their affairs involving their fighter, when in reality, Eddie's not breaking any rules. He's a promoter, and he wants to do a fight.
But it does create an expensive problem, because if he's willing to put up more money for the rights to the fight than you are
either going to have to put more money in the pot to keep the rights for the fight, or send your fighter across the street. Two scenarios that Bob Arum ain't too happy about. That's what happened with the Vasyl Lomachenko versus Anthony Crolla WBA mandated title fight. Eddie Hearn wanted to use that mandated title fight as an avenue of opportunity to get Vasyl Lomachenko on DAZN, and as a result of that, Bob overpaid Anthony Crolla to ensure Top Rank keeps the rights to the fight. So you can see,
Eddie wanted to take that fight to a purse bid.
and in order to prevent that from happening, risk losing the rights to that fight in a purse bid situation, Bob threw Anthony Crolla a little bit more money.
Surely you can see that Bob doesn't want to have to pay more for a fight than he thinks a fight is worth, but that's the situation Eddie creates.
Matchroom and DAZN, when they debuted in America, they were willing to overpay for a lot of fights that commercially weren't worth the amount of money they were spending, like that Mikey Garcia versus Jesse Vargas fight, in order to attract eyes and top talent to their platform. They have successfully done that, but it creates a more competitive environment for the other promoters that are out there. And now, about 3 or 4 years after DAZN's American debut,
Eddie Hearn and Matchroom have become a fly in the ointment for a lot of people.
don't you notice that Bob and Leonard and Lou, they don't say about Oscar De La Hoya what they say about Eddie Hearn, even though Golden Boy Promotions is in bed with DAZN, the same as Matchroom.
But you don't see them going off on Oscar because Oscar's no competition.
Golden Boy Promotions hasn't been the same since they parted ways with Canelo Alvarez. Rather, when Canelo Alvarez parted ways with them, jumped into bed with Matchroom, thereby strengthening their stable of fighters and the fights they make. The size and scale of their events.
The real reason Leonard and Lou and Bob don't like Eddie is because they're not going to welcome competition. They don't want to have to work harder.
They really don't like him making offers to their fighters for dollar amounts that they may not be getting on their side of the street. It's not a secret that DAZN and Matchroom at times, they are willing to overpay for fights.
At least they were in the past, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
But in truth, that was always going to be the situation. That was always going to be the case. DAZN didn't debut in America to make buddies with everybody that was already here. In truth, it was always about competition, always about drawing top talent to their platform. It was their intention to disrupt the market.
To make an omelet, you're going to have to crack a couple of eggs.
In spite of what the naysayers and the critics might have you believe, 3 to 4 years after DAZN's American debut, they are now a bigger platform than they were then when they first started.
The platform is available in 170 countries, whereas before it was just about, 7, 8, or 9?
They're putting on more shows, more cards. Their stable of fighters has expanded. It has grown. The two biggest names on either side of the Atlantic Ocean both box on DAZN. The biggest name in women's boxing.
She boxes on DAZN.
Don't expect Lou DiBella, Leonard Ellerby, and Bob Arum to be happy about that. Why would they? This is their competitor we're talking about. These are competing promotional outfits, competing platforms. They're not going to be happy about this. They're not going to like Eddie. And if they don't lambast Oscar, whose promotional outfit is also in bed with DAZN, it's because Oscar's not having the success that Eddie is having.
They got no reason to hate on that guy. He's not a nuisance. He's not a fly in the ointment to them. He's no competition.
But Eddie Hearn is, especially when he's making offers to their fighters. Offers for dollar amounts that perhaps are greater than what they are willing to pay those fighters. So you could see how that might chap their ass.
And this is why they've formed a little We Hate Eddie Hearn club.
So it's all inconsequential to the boxing fan because, believe it or not, the boxing fan actually benefits from a more competitive market. These competing promoters and platforms, they all have to put on the best fights, the best shows, and stay on the top of their game. So it's good news for us, but bad news for them.
Best thing that could come out of this is if Top Rank and the PBC do more fights amongst themselves to compete with Eddie.